All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining today's webinar, Microsoft's Meet Me Tenant and Exostar Secure Access, Raising the Bar for Secure Collaboration. Before we get started, just want to cover a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to 1 hour. It includes both a short demonstration as well as a couple questions that were submitted. You will be muted to enable us to present without interruption today. Because those questions that we are going to answer were those that were submitted prior to today's event when folks registered. If for some reason there's an outage during today's presentation, just wait for a minute and refresh the page. At any time, you can also use that link you received via email to come back into the webinar as well. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations that we might reference during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. This can be found on our website at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after today's session. You can also use that same YouTube link you received in the email to see the recording at any time. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, if you have a specific question about our managed Microsoft 365 product, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com, or you can go to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature on every page. We'd be more than happy to discuss any of those questions that you might have. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So this is today's agenda. We're going to cover the Microsoft Meet Me tenant, the major issues and challenges that folks have with partner collaboration today, the architecture for that, and then how Exostar's managed Microsoft 365 can be utilized as a solution that can deliver that as a service for you and your partners. As I mentioned, we'll then end up with a question and answer session, and then you'll be able to review this webinar at any time in the future. So my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions and Sales Engineering here at Exostar. I work with all of our customers across all of our products in both the adoption and common usage of those. And I've been involved with the managed Microsoft products since day one. I'm joined today by Richard Wakeman of Microsoft. Richard, you want to take a chance to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, Richard Wakeman. I'm the Chief Architect for our aerospace and defense business here at Microsoft. So we focus exclusively on the defense industrial base, and predominantly for those customers of ours that have advanced compliance requirements that would oftentimes drive them into our government cloud solutions. Been at Microsoft for about 20 years and have had an opportunity to work on deployments of cloud since even predating Office 365 and Azure, and have had now just an awesome opportunity to engage on our new cloud service offerings such as Microsoft 365 GCC High and Azure Government Secret.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me today, Richard. So Exostar has been in the partner collaboration business for quite a while. As many of you today work with Exostar credentials to collaborate with the primes out there as well as across the supply chain, you may also be using a solution that Exostar has been managing as a service for many years, which we call FormPass, which is built on top of Microsoft SharePoint. As we've talked with our customers and in our discussions with Richard and the Microsoft team, we understand that partner collaboration is something that is growing. And with that, the challenges and the types of collaboration are also growing. That's why many of us, especially as the pandemic hit, have started to utilize Teams on a daily basis. We're now used to a more rich and robust collaboration experience, And we want that same kind of experience as we reach out and work with third parties and other partners. But especially in our industry, right, in the defense industrial base, extending that boundary and working with those outside your own corporate firewalls is always a challenge. You want to be able to ensure that those organizations you're working with have a trust relationship with you and your organization, that you can ensure that their credentialing and identity validation for their individual users meet the needs of your organization and your security organization. And oftentimes, because we are talking about sensitive controlled unclassified information or other types of proprietary information, we want to make sure that the way we share that meets our corporate standards and ensures that those types of data leakage things don't occur. And that's really the kinds of challenges that both the Meet Me tenant and Exostar's implementation of that really look to solve. Richard, anything you want to add about that?
Yes, absolutely, especially in alignment with looking at the compliance requirements that you have that may extend either from the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification that's pending, to look at both empowering your people to collaborate, but do so within the boundaries, right, of making sure that you do protect the controlled and classified information, export controlled data, et cetera, and leveraging many of the data protection policies that are enabled within the Microsoft platform, but really ultimately enabled for those organizations that may not be hosted by your enterprise, right? So the external subcontractor, suppliers, vendors, etc.
Absolutely. And I find that this area also has some unique challenges with many businesses that work in both the defense industrial base and outside it, right? Many organizations have somewhat of that dual business. And so that ability to allow those who work in the defense industrial base to work with others in, if you will, a cordoned off or a secure enclave often helps you with that overall need to comply. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard to go over, if you will, how Microsoft views this and some help for you as you start to think about how are you going to work with partners and third parties in this space. Richard,
All
I'll
right,
stop sharing and let you take it.
there we go. Excellent. Well, many of you who have seen me do webinars or presentations in the past may be familiar with this slide. It really illustrates the multiple different government enclaves that Microsoft hosts, in alignment with, both protecting, for example, controlled and classified information, federal tax information, criminal justice information, etc. The acronym soup of various different compliance measures that you'd have depending on content type. And we began with our course commercial environment, and many of the collaboration and collaborators that you would work with may still reside in commercial. And that really does provide us with a global solution that is both in alignment with your commercial side of the house, as well as offering the enclaves that you can be able to deploy within the United States, in terms of looking at, for example, meeting compliance requirements with DFAR 7012 and CMMC level 2 and above. Just to highlight a couple of points here without going through the whole spiel is that, today we've got the U.S. Department of Defense hosted within our U.S. sovereign cloud in what would be the Office 365 DoD environment, which is paired together with Azure Government. So both Azure Government and DoD hit the higher watermark for compliance with Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide, or SRG, impact level 4 and 5. And that's where, the DoD proper is deployed on the unclassified side of the house. Looking at the Exostar solution, as well as where many of the DIB prime contractors and a host of those throughout the supply chain for the U.S. Department of Defense have positioned Office 365 in the GCC High environment. So GCC High is also paired with Azure Government as well, and has the higher watermark of compliance, being able to do impact level 4 and 5, as well as protection for export control data and other CUI specified control requirements, and is ultimately a twin environment to the DoD. The primary reason why there's a DoD and a GCC High, is that there are unique restrictions for the DoD IL5 environment that really preclude anyone that isn't the DoD proper, or those working on behalf or on a DoD specific contract, holding like a PIV and CAT card, that would need to get their own tenant. For example, a tenant that would be your own enterprise tenant would be in GCC High as opposed to the DoD environment. But collectively, they're all part of what we refer to as the U.S. Sovereign Cloud, and they share a number of common services. So if you look at the Azure Government Fabric, to include infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, many of the Microsoft 365 security services, such as Azure Active Directory, are all hosted out of Azure Government and shared between GCC High and DoD. Also gave us a great platform to be able to host additional workloads such as Dynamics 365 and GitHub and DevOps and various others that may be deployed within the Azure government environment. So to really drill down into this at a high level, the unique characteristics of Microsoft 365 GCC High and its pairing with Azure Government and the U.S. Sovereign Cloud is that it's able to give you a contractual agreement that you can be able to meet. For example, the requirements for protecting export control data and controlled unclassified information to the higher watermark. So you'll see here, for example, that we can do CMMCs level 1 through 3 within Microsoft 365 GCC High. So all levels of CMMC, as well as the IL4 equivalency. In fact, it's an IL5 equivalency for GCC High as well. Also meets those control requirements, for example, FedRAMP High, as well as with NIST 801 and 71, that's in alignment with CMMC Level 2. We do have many of our DIB contractors that also deploy into the GCC environment, but it's very specifically caveated in this case for those that would not have CUI specified, such as ITAR, export control data. But to be able to meet all the higher watermark of compliance, the Exostar solution has been deployed into the GCC High enclave. We look at it as a shared scope of responsibility. There is, a number of controls, for example, for compliance that you can inherit directly from Microsoft. But the mileage really does vary, right? If you see this in respect of those that you get to inherit fully from Microsoft versus a shared scope of responsibility, where you as a customer would also need to turn some knobs and dials or document your policies and procedures in order to fully demonstrate compliance with, let's say, CMMC Level 2, that you get a lot more inheritance for software as a service, as you can see here. That would include like Office 365 for the Exostar solution, or on the farthest end of the spectrum, it would be running everything on-prem, in which case you own 100% of the compliance, even if you're using Microsoft software, such as Microsoft Office Rich Client running on your PC, or traditional boxed Office with Office Exchange Server and SharePoint Server, etc. So it really does give you an opportunity to not only accelerate your path to compliance by leveraging the software as a service solution with Office 365, but also begin to lean in on managed service providers that can be able to take care of many of the other roles, like a middle tier of compliance. And that's where Exostar really fits in. So if you look at this shared scope of responsibility, you may say for software as a service, such as the collaboration suite with Office 365, that you can inherit, somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 50 to 55% of the controls have Microsoft scope of responsibility that help you contribute to the 110 controls. But as you start to look at the customer scope of responsibility, that Exostar does have the managed service provider capability so that they can help you with, for example, access control and how you establish authentication and authorization into your Office 365 environment. So you shift some of that burden that you would have for compliance over to the managed service provider. And that would include also, for example, protecting data with pre-configured sensitivity labels for Microsoft Purview, et cetera, that are really custom tailored towards helping you to achieve CMMC practice objectives. Now, if we look at the distribution in terms of how our customers would typically adopt cloud, oftentimes today they'll either be on premises or have adopted the commercial cloud, in which case they, in many cases, wouldn't be able to store controlled unclassified information within the commercial cloud. So they end up setting up some various enclaves. And those enclaves may be a carve out that's in your on-premises environment, or as you can see on the left-hand side of this chart, that we've got GCC High set up as an enclave. And that would include, for example, user accounts and mailboxes and OneDrive for Business and Teams accounts for scheduling meetings and so forth, that would be in alignment with protecting controlled unclassified information internally within your enterprise, right? So this would be typically your enterprise tenant for your company, where your users would set up and have GCC High accounts for protecting controlled unclassified information, of course, being able to achieve CMMC level 2 compliance. Now, if we start to shift from left to right, what you'll find is that for many of our defense industrial based customers, that straddling between commercial and gov tends to be a degraded user experience. So you'll see many times that our customers will begin to migrate into GCC High, in which case they would only have one account where they would meet that higher watermark for compliance, and they could cohabitate and collaborate effectively internally within their organization, other users that may also be in commercial, et cetera. But that's really still more for an internal set of use cases. As you start to look at the meet me tenant is unique, in which case, there is use cases where you can be able to invite folks in externally into your tenant. But we found that the time frames for being able to do external collaboration within GCC High internal tenants has been extended out, just in terms of being able to meet various compliance requirements like CMMC level 2, and getting all the data protection and management and operations and incident reporting all down in such a manner that you would be able to achieve compliance for external users coming into your tenant. So this whole concept of a meet me tenant would be that you could set up an enclave, whether it's complementary to your commercial side on-premises deployment, or even if your organization is deployed into GCC High as an enterprise, still having a meet me tenant or an enclave that would be designated almost like an extranet, if you will. And historically, an extranet would be like a DMZ, demilitarized demilitarized zone where you could invite external users in, share content with them without necessarily giving them access inside your enterprise network. So this whole concept of the Meet Me tenant is to have a nice perimeter boundary that would be external, but have the added benefit of an organization like Exostar that can manage that tenant on your behalf, if not get you almost all the way to CMMC compliance with that configuration that's offered in the Meet Me tenant. I do want to call out quickly just around the Meet Me tenant being a focus on shared data, and typically that would be the types of information that you would be sharing with subcontractors, suppliers, vendors, etc., even your DoD customer. And that shared data would be hosted in a Meet Me tenant. It could be anything from unstructured file storage, right? It could be a file share. It could be a SharePoint team site with a document library. Of course, the biggest demand recently has been for teams, being able to set up a team and invite external users in to share documents and, of course, collaborate with group chat and so forth. There's also other shared components that are part of email. That would include shared mailboxes, public folders in the past. I haven't seen public folders in use as much since Teams come around, but there's still a lot of on-premises public folders in use today by some of our customers. So it gives you an opportunity to start to migrate that and have that hosted out of the Meet Me tenant. It also could be a published application as well, such as ERP, could be a PLM solution that you use, CAD, CAM, DevOps, et cetera, that could be hosted within the Meet Me Enclave in terms of being able to provide application access in such a manner that would be secured, especially with Exostar's managed service provider, identity provider. The things that are excluded at this point are personal data. So that would be your own personal inbox, your mailbox that still be managed in your enterprise tenant, your OneDrive for business, etc. If we look at the characteristics of the Meet Me shared data enclave, it is a logically and segmented container for protecting data. And it's purposely built to support protections of sensitive information types, such as controlled and classified information, and has very explicit requirements and enforcement of conditional access policies and network isolation, such as making sure that the data stays within the continental United States and, for example, managed by US persons, etc. In many cases, these enclaves do have a restriction of having, for example, only US persons that could access it. It's not a hard requirement. You can invite in anyone you want, but if that is your higher watermark for compliance, for example, protecting export control data may not be something you could do in your enterprise tenant, but you could achieve within a extranet or Meet Me tenant. It also has policies in place that would prohibit data exfiltration, right? So, for example, if data exfils from the tenant, that can automatically be encrypted with purview information protection, for example, or have other controls in place maybe that just prohibits you from downloading or moving that data whatsoever. So people have to come in to access that information. And it would often mirror what you would have in your on-premises environment. So, for example, if you got an extranet in your on-premises or DMZ, oftentimes this is a great opportunity to do a lift and shift into the cloud and be able to host that into a Meet Me enclave. So, from an architecture perspective, if you look at this particular diagram of the Meet Me tenant, the illustration does show that your enterprise tenant may be in GCC high, could be in commercial as well. There's no specific requirement that you're in commercial or GCC high. And now that we support collaboration through the Exostar Cloud Broker, the identity manager, that it does give now the ability to have external access from both commercial and government tenants, and of course, outside of Microsoft 365 altogether. In this particular case, the enterprise tenant in GCC High is set up in a hybrid configuration with an on-premises environment. So that's the bottom half of the illustration, most commonly deployed with our customers, in that you have a extranet tenant, which is the top right, in which case you could host various teams or SharePoint Online document libraries and team sites that could be shared more ubiquitously and externally, but have all those right controls in place for protecting controlled and classified information. One of the things that you can also take away from this diagram is that most of the external collaborators that you would invite into your tenant may be managed by Exostar. And we'll get into a bit more depth in how that operates. But that authentication, whether it's with a consumer account or even an account that's not in Office 365 at all, that Exostar does manage an identity provider that can ultimately provide strong authentication and multi-factor authentication into your Meet Me tenant. And if you already do have accounts, such as your enterprise tenant, then we can use the B2B capabilities of Azure Active Directory to invite, for example, your enterprise tenant users into the Meet Me tenant. So it's a combination of both authentication from Exostar as well as from Microsoft in those specific cases where you've got, for example, those enterprise users that are also already in Microsoft 365. So with that, we'll go ahead and transition back over to Kevin here, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Great, thanks, Richard. So everyone, let me take you through, if you will, how Exostar implements that Meet Me tenant using Exostar's product, Exostar Managed Microsoft 365. So this solution really consists of three different components. These components are delivered as one solution. We build on top of an Exostar managed tenant utilizing Teams, and Exostar solution is built on top of that familiar user experience, right? So individuals will log in and they will see Teams, or they can switch to the SharePoint view, but that's where they will be doing their collaboration. Now, this is linked together with Exostar's identity provider solution, right? Our managed access gateway, which many of you may be using today as you work with primes or you work with others within the defense industrial base as you collaborate on a number of different things. This is the, if you will, the gateway into that secure enclave. It does all those things around identity validation. It's what enforces multi-factor authentication to get into the enclave. It's what allows you to bring those partners in that you may not have a trust relationship with. You may not be comfortable using an Azure B2B connection because you're not quite sure what their practices are around their users. Or they may not yet be enforcing multi-factor authentication across their whole organization. So you want to ensure an identity provider that does those things. Also, you want to ensure that the life cycle of that user is managed in a compliant manner. And Exostar does that also through our managed access gateway. It also allows you to bring in those partners who may not have a relationship with Microsoft. They may be using a different identity provider. They may be using a different system. They may even be from social accounts if you've got that kind of relationship. So all of those kinds of external users can be brought securely into the tenant, because Exostar will do all that front-end identity proofing, user lifecycle management, removing of users, things like that, for your organization. Now, this entire environment is FedRAMP moderate equivalent, including, if you will, the Exostar managed portions, right? And Exostar's managed portions is the Exostar tech ops team and customer support team, right? So technical operations is managing this tenant. Our tech ops team is also U.S. citizens on U.S. soil, so we can also manage that ITAR information and meet those particular standards. Our support team is also here in the U.S. citizens as well, background checked, all those things. So all of those things wrap up into the solution, and we can help you reach that CMMC 2.0 compliance, make sure you're meeting the current NIST 800-171 requirements, and provide you that information as going forward as these things may change. Additionally, one of the key things with this platform is that we're not going to change the way you work today, right? As Richard mentioned, this secure enclave is external to your corporate environment. So you're going to continue to use your corporate email. You're going to continue to use your corporate systems, most likely your corporate team's environment, to continue to work internally with your users and your constituents. It's only when you need to work with that compliant partner, or you need to work with that third party, or you need to secure or process controlled unclassified information, that you would work within the secure enclave itself. So it's creating that trusted collaboration site built on top of Microsoft 365, using Exostar's management and verification of identities and users and organizations to ensure that they and you collaborate in that compliant manner. Additionally, because this is set up as a single tenant, Exostar can put those same kind of enterprise controls you have around data loss prevention, security labels, things like that, also configure the tenant to meet those things as well. So if you've gone through that exercise to create security labels and things like that around documents, if you're marking controlled unclassified information, etc., Exostar can work with the other Microsoft services like Purview and Cloud Defender for apps, etc., to enforce those same kind of policies within this enclave. So that provides you that, not only compliant with CMMC and NIST 800-171, but possibly also compliant with your own internal controls and protections as well. Just as Richard showed a shared responsibility model between us and Microsoft as utilizing this solution and building on top of it, we also provide that same kind of shared responsibility model between Exostar and its customers, right? Exostar provides a matrix to you that will show you that Exostar manages 85 of those 110 controls around NIST 800-171, and therefore around the upcoming CMMC 2.0 compliance levels as well. There are some things like access control, for example, because you're going to determine who gets accounts within this enclave. However, Exostar's application will enforce particular roles and responsibilities that meet the needs of compliance for those users. Right? You're going to have to be responsible for training your users and ensuring that they do things the way you want them to. Right? The enclave itself is accessed from your users' systems, right? Your users' computers, laptops, etc. So you would still manage those endpoints, typically from if you've already got Microsoft instantiated and you're using the Active Directory and Azure Active Directory and things like that, doing things around endpoint protection, all those kinds of things. You are already doing those things. This is just an extension of that for those identities, and also ensuring that that same kind of things to those partners that you're inviting in, and ensuring that they're working in that same compliant manner. This solution is, as I mentioned before, part of Exostar's overall platform, right? This is one of those applications that we add on for Exostar's community, can satisfy an additional need, not only access to supply chain applications, but also access to this environment to share information that you may very well be doing, not only across your supply chain, but other partners as well. It builds on top of Microsoft itself and can be extended into other environments as necessary. Now, what we do around secure access, many of you may have, as I mentioned before, already experienced, because you're an Exostar customer today, to either work together in other applications, or you got an Exostar account with credentials and possibly a hardware token or a software token or a one-time password that you're using as that single login across multiple organizations. We apply that same front end to the Microsoft 365 solution that can be extended to meet your particular compliance needs. This extends not only to providing application access, right? So Exostar, one of the components of this solution is an Exostar application built into the Teams interface. That Exostar application provides that direct connection into Exostar's IAM solution. It's what allows you to join people to the application directly from within that. It's the thing that will show you the users that are already part of the community, and also allow you to invite those external users. It's going to enforce the particular kind of identity proofing you want. If within this enclave and with particular partners, you need to ensure that they're US citizens, right? Exostar, as part of our proofing service, we can do eligible person verification. So not only do they have a username, password, and a multi-factor authentication to get in, but you can also enforce that, and they've got to be a US person to work within the environment. We can work with different kinds of credentials. And if you've already got that multi-factor authentication, or your partners do because of some other interaction they've had with you, they can use that same multi-factor authentication to get into the secure enclave as well. So Exostar wraps this secure access module into the managed Microsoft 365 environment. That is that front door. And then the solution itself is architected like this, right? So that application is that Microsoft 365 app that you see in the left-hand corner. So this is an Exostar application embedded within the Teams environment. It's what enforces those Microsoft 365 tenant policies, the creation of teams, the user invitation process, etc. It is what provides that direct federation to Exostar's secure access module, but can also enable you to set up an Azure B2B connection with not only your own organization, if you already have an Azure Active Directory and you want to utilize that, either if you've already got a GCC high environment, we can also allow that connection as well. If you've got particular partners that you've already established a trust relationship with, they're also in GCC high, and you want to directly invite users through that kind of connection, Exostar can support that as your B2B connection through those whitelisted organizations as well. But if you don't know how that partner does things, and you want to ensure that they meet particular standards, they are not part of an Azure cloud. Maybe they have on-site Active Directory. Maybe they're not an Active Directory consumer. They're a different service, if you will. You can also invite those users through the secure access module as well. And again, all of this environment itself is up in GCC High, as Richard mentioned. The Exostar Tech Ops team and support teams, US citizens on US soil. So we wrap all of this around that compliance environment to ensure that you're collaborating securely and to meet your particular compliance needs. Now, I do have a short demo prepared for you to show you how this works. So in this particular environment, right, I'm acting as a particular role, right? As I mentioned, that application, that Exostar application that you see here embedded in the left-hand nav, is enforcing particular roles in this environment. One of those roles is what we call a sponsor admin. That's the Exostar customer whose enclave this is. And Adam is the person who can invite other organizations in. He can create teams. He can invite users. He is, if you will, one of those admins across the entire system. He can do that through an administration tab, which allows all those particular administrative kind of activities. He can look at particular users and determine their roles, what teams they have access to. He can invite other people to be sponsor admins because he shouldn't be the only one. He can bring in those external domains, either through Azure itself, because these people have Azure Active Directory. We have a trust relationship with them, so we're going to allow them to come in through an Azure B2B connection, or via Exostar. If they're not part of that whitelist, then then I can add them in, right? Just put their @ in their domain, but they're going to come in through Exostar. I'm going to look up users, join users, etc. from there. I can get reports from the system about different kinds of activity, including a full audit report based on a particular time period of what I want generated. I can just do a particular team, and this is going to export as an Excel file, which will open up and show me these different activities over that particular time period. I can create teams and invite users as well, right? So if I want to create a new team, I select the duration of that team. This is going to create that collaboration space that I can then invite users to. Now, when I get that space, the users will work within that environment just as they would in their team's environment today. That includes the ability to switch over to a SharePoint view of that space and utilize those same capabilities. Once I've got that team created, I can invite those individual users. So let me choose that team I just did. I can invite those users singularly, or I can do it from a list. Based on the domains those users are coming from, I'm going to see that one of these isn't eligible, right? I don't have Yahoo yet as one of those domains that's authorized. So Adam could go into the admin domain and add that, and then they could invite that individual. There are some users that are already part of our community here, right? They are members already within this team's environment. They can be invited to that team. However, because some are from my organization, so Adam's from Glory Minerals, so he can invite those people as team managers. That means they can then manage that team space for themselves. They don't have to go back to Adam for these things. But those who are external to my organization, they just get invited as members to that team. What it also tells me is some of these people I want to invite aren't yet in Exostar. They're from domains that are coming from Exostar, including Glory Minerals itself, but they're not yet in Exostar. So I can invite them, and then this will kick off that invitation through Exostar's Managed Access Gateway RIM solution to get this user into the community, including that whatever credentials I require of users of my systems, whatever multi-factor authentication component I require, etc. Once that's established with the user, they'll also be added to the particular team that I want them added to. I submit the invitation, the various emails will go out, right? For the 2 people that are already part of the system, they're going to get emails just welcoming them to this new team, a link to that team. Dury here is going to get an invitation to Exostar itself to create that credential. Once she's in, she'll see whatever Glory Minerals calls Managed Microsoft 365, and then they'll have access to that particular team that we set up. Once the users are in, as I mentioned before, it's going to look just like Teams, right? We're enabling all the Teams functionality, including that ability to create private teams within Teams, only invite certain members of the team to those areas, allow that, that chatting feature, if you will. So start a conversation, including starting a conversation with Emma, who's outside my organization. The system notices my presence, right? I've got the green check mark, so I'm currently in the system. I've logged in as Emma as well. So she would, she sees this team space. She sees this as well, right? Oops. They could start, an IP telephony conversation, right? I can right click and initiate a call with Emma. I could also, talk with her or collaborate with her around a particular document, right? So we've got a folder file structure. We've got additional applications added. You see Emma here. She doesn't have as many teams within this particular team space, right? Because these are private. There are some private channels that the team owner, Adam, set up. I've only got some of those. I could go into a document itself and co-author this document with the individual. So again, we're providing you that Teams functionality. Whoops, for some reason that didn't work. I'll have to go check that one. Demos must go wrong at some point every time. And that's mine. And then we could work on that document together. So again, just want to emphasize we're not, we're allowing you that Teams collaboration experience. But allowing you that experience and that ability to extend that experience to those external users. And do this outside your own enclave. So you put those guardrails in, right? So that's why this is that Meet Me tenant, that extranet experience, if you will, to do this outside my own so I don't have any of that accidental data loss. Now, Exostar can do this in a few different models, right? We've got the standard enclave, which I just showed you, which was if a customer also is in GCC High. Exostar can set up this managed tenant, use an Azure to B2B connection to connect you to that environment and allow you to invite those third parties either through other B2B connections or through Exostar itself. If you're not in a Microsoft environment or you're not in GCC High and you want to really separate those environments, we also have a premium enclave, which is this managed enclave, utilizing Exostar as that front end for all users, including your corporate users, right? So everybody would come through Exostar to get into and work within the tenant. We also offer this for small and medium-sized businesses. We typically classify those as 75 users or less, right? That is this same model. The demo is the exact same. The experience is the exact same. In that one, we just leverage a shared tenant, but we put the controls in place for that information is only available to members who have been invited to those particular teams and to work with those particular organizations. So a number of different ways that you can work together. So that really concludes the formal part of the presentation today. As I mentioned, we are going to take some question and answers. I've got those teed up, but if you're not familiar with Exostar, right? Exostar works in highly regulated industries. We are a front end to large organizations that want to collaborate with third parties and partners, either in your typical collaboration scenarios, documentation, studies, etc., but also in supply chain applications. We work across the globe. We have a particular emphasis here in the defense industrial base. So we got two questions in before we went, and Richard, I'll ask you to participate in this portion. So the first one, we're on GCC High and looking for a secure file sharing and collaboration option. How easy is it to implement a Meet Me tenant for sharing with other contractors and suppliers that aren't on GCC High? Now, this is a softball question. I swear to God, I didn't tee this up. This did come in via the submission request. But Richard, we often get the question, well, how easy is it for me to set this up versus going through a solution like Exostar? And I think the key one is that aren't on GCC High.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the first question I often get with many of our customers, especially in the small, medium-sized company area, and even all the way up to the largest of the primes, is, do we need GCC High? Once you go through that rationalization, and you say we do, then it goes into, okay, well, now that we're deploying and migrating into GCC High, what knobs and dials or configuration do we need to establish in order to meet the requirements for CMMC? And it's less than trivial. There's a lot of resources that are available, some of which, we've published as part of our CMMC acceleration, but it's still, in terms of a customer scope of responsibility, the responsibility of the customer to go through and implement all those configuration changes. And there's not specifically a cookbook to do so, right? There's a lot of guidance. There's recommended practices, but it still leaves a lot to the customer to figure out. This is how you would need to configure the tenant, but it's not just technical configurations. There's also policy enforcements. There's end user training, and of the 110 controls, there's easily about 22 or so that are fully customer scope of responsibility. So being able to lean in on Exostar, a managed service provider, to make all those initial configurations for you, to take the mystery out of it all, does really not only accelerate your path to compliance, but also reduces your costs in a lot of ways, just because figuring it out all on your own or going in a self-service path can be quite cumbersome.
Absolutely. And for me, it's really those edge cases that you may not think about when you're first considering setting up a Meet Me tenant. It's like, okay, I can just set up a second tenant. I can invite my user. I can invite those third parties in. But then it's like, well, what if those third parties aren't also in Microsoft? So I can't necessarily do an Azure B2B connection. Do I also, then I have to start thinking about, how do I manage those identities of those individuals? Do I set up a separate AD for those folks, give them separate accounts, if you will, and do all those things? And then it's also that ongoing support, right? Is your help desk, right, your support organization, ready to take on those partners, right? Because they're going to have questions. They're going to want to know, how do I get connected? This isn't working today. What's up with that? And Exostar can help you with those things as well. So number 2 here, can you describe the migration process from MS365? I know you get this a lot, Richard, so I'm going to let you kind of address this, because this isn't a replacement for what you've got in MS365 today.
Yeah, to and from. really is going to largely depend on which services are in scope,
Right.
right? So it was quite simple back in the days when it was just email, right? You can migrate mailboxes and you can migrate them
Yes.
in, you can migrate them out, you could do consolidations, tenant to tenant migrations, pretty straightforward using a plethora of different migration tools that are available, sometimes coming from on-prem just by Microsoft first-party service, right, to leveraging BitTitan or Quest or AvePoint, et cetera. It can be less than trivial if you're looking at migrating petabytes of data from SharePoint, for example. Tools from ShareGate and Metalogix and so forth can help facilitate that. One thing I would say is that we do have a number of partners that kind of are specialized in migrating to and from and between for the migrations that you could take advantage of. I'd say much of it has become somewhat standardized even for teams. So if it's non-customized, non-configured,
Right.
heavily configured, then migrations, are fairly straightforward. If it is highly customized environments, as you can imagine, trying to migrate from one ERP system to Dynamics 365, or leveraging O365 can be a lot more cumbersome.
Absolutely. So, my advice to anybody who's thinking about that migration process is first, as Richard kind of mentioned in his first statement, it really is what those services are, right? MS365 can encompass a little or a lot. So it is taking that inventory of what you actually mean when you say migration process and those different services that you're currently consuming. And then, kind of catalog those and then think about the other pieces. But, this is one of those things that, as you mentioned, Richard, that leveraging a partner is a great way to kind of ease that burden. So those are the questions we received. I want to thank everybody. So Exostar's managed Microsoft 365 is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. We know many of you join these webinars to understand kind of the CMMC process, NIST 800, 171, et cetera. If you are on that journey and you want some help, please take a look at Exostar Policy Pro, our certification assistant. Obviously, if you need a place to help manage, store, process, and transmit that controlled unclassified information within or outside your organization, then obviously managed Microsoft 365 is a way to go as well. We also have a number of partners that can help you along that journey as well. And obviously our partners like very much like Microsoft and others can also assist you on that journey. So with that, Richard, thank you very much for your time and participation today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep. And thank everybody for coming. I hope everyone got the information they needed. If not, please reach out to us. You can reach us on our website at www.exostar.com. Chat with us at any time. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks so much.